So as I said, I'm Mike O'Shaughnessy, and Pat asked me to MC this, so I'll do that. And she asked if I would say a few words because I was one of Ken's first doctoral students here at Dalhousie. Actually, I think Larry Katz and I were the first two. And I knew Ken in a number of different ways. He was my graduate supervisor. He was my teacher. He was my department head, my mentor, and most importantly, my friend. Now, the 60s, when I started, I'm an old guy, right? The 60s were a tumultuous time. For those who were around then, right, we had the war, I'm an American. We had the war in Vietnam. We had the occupation of the president of Dalhousie's office by Larry Katz, right? We had the attempt to unionize the staff by Larry and his friends. We had an incident in the elevator involving a senior professor in the Department of Biochemistry and some disgruntled graduate students or friends of disgruntled graduate students. There was just a general societal unrest. But through it all, Ken was Ken. You'd go in to see him, and in those days, he'd puff on the pipe or do whatever he was doing, but he kept his cool. Now, it's one thing I really appreciated, and Pat never knew this until today, is Ken never asked me, why did I come here, right, from the US. A lot of people in the department thought they knew why I came here. They didn't have a clue, because I never told them. They would, I had one in particular take after me as a draft dodger. She didn't have a clue. I was the opposite, but it was none of her business. But Ken never asked. He always treated me with respect and professionalism. And that's a great thing to do. Now, in the beginning of my program, I was kind of disappointed I never saw Ken. But if those who knew him understood that he was dealing with his own personal tragedy in the late 60s, and Ken just needed some space. Ken did a very good thing for me, is that he reminded me that graduate school was about me proving if I could hack it. It wasn't about him. It was about me. And I kept that for the rest of my life, that it was the responsibility of a graduate student to succeed. And if you didn't want to do it, if you didn't want to do the work, do something else for a living. And I trained a lot of students, and I always took that to the table with them. We students had to make a commitment, and Ken always stressed that. You need to make a commitment. And these are the things that helped shape my career, was Ken telling me the way it was, because it is that way. Science is a hard profession. And if you don't want to make the commitment, work in Starbucks. And Ken also told me that a scientist never has any downtime. Thoughts come and go, but most of the time they don't happen in your office. You would say, well, I'm going to work from here to there, but I'm going to do all my work in the office. Well, that's never the way it is. You never keep thinking. My own life is that I think this preoccupation with thinking was one of the reasons we have such hard personal lives, because we're always thinking about something, always thinking about work or whatever, but we don't really have a downtime. At least I never did. And Ken told me, if you're good, that's the way it's going to be. And he was right on that one. When I was thinking about, another thing he did was, when I was thinking about leaving Kingston, I had a job at Queens, which I liked, and Bob Stewart, who was Ken's friend, was a really good guy, but I was paid by the Ontario Ministry of Health, and they drove me crazy. And I called Ken and I said, you know, these guys are driving me crazy, and I'm starting to not like science. So Ken said, don't waste your education, leave. And I did. I just having that, I needed to have a sounding board because I was so disgusted with the Ontario ministry. I just had to speak to someone about it. Now, when I left Ontario, that opened the door for me to work with HIV and AIDS. And I had a truly satisfying 25 years of contributions, and I helped set in motion in BC revolutionary ideas, treatments, and diagnostic tests. The Center for Excellence that I set up was an extraordinary success. And it was Ken's support to tell me, this isn't an easy life. You got to stay at it. And, you know, don't ever lose sight of what you want to do. And that kept me through it. And I had, you know, I was much younger then. I had to weather a fair number of storms, but I never lost my resolve. And when I would run into Ken, I would always talk to him about stuff like this. Ken helped give me the steel, the backbone steel that was required. Now, personally, Ken and I were good friends. I mean, I even lived through when he built the Tower of Babel on Vienna Street. That that tower there behind his house, whatever. But he and Patsy, or Pat, were with us the day my son walked in a place called Ship Harbor. We trout fished together. We went on treks in the woods, which some of us were ill prepared to do. And to even get one up from them, I was crossing a peat bog on that trip, and I stepped through the peat and almost drowned. I had a 65-pound backpack on and sunk like a stone. But that was all part of life. We could remember those things, like he would say, just how stupid were you? I said, pretty. Remember, I was from New York, not Nova Scotia. Now, Ken and I built 4 boats together. Well, I built one, Ken built one, Ken Easterbrook built one, and Larry Katz. But together we built 4 boats. And Ken always joked, and he was ruthless in this joke, that I proved that 2-part epoxy floats, since my boat was mainly 2-part epoxy. But I wanted to see him last year to tell him that my boat was finally destroyed. After 42 years, my boat had it. But it was pretty good. It lasted 42 years, but it was the ugliest thing because there was extra glue on it all over the place. Now, because he helped me start that, I actually got into woodworking and ended up as a hobby doing fine furniture, mainly mission-style oak, very fancy stuff. And Ken kind of got me started on that. When I was one of Ken's students, we were going to have a Christmas party, and I suggested to Ken, you know, you ought to ask this young woman who works with me, Pat, you ought to ask her to go to the Christmas party. And he did. And the other day in the newspaper, I saw they have been married 39 years. And it just started with, Ken, why don't you just do this? And he did it. And I think it was a good thing for the two of them. Now, I moved back to Nova Scotia a year and a half ago, and because I've been out west. I spoke with, but I never met Ken again, as I broke my neck last summer and was somewhat restricted in movement, as you know, with all that stuff on. I am truly sorry for that, but Ken, you will always be in my heart and mind. I had great training at Dow, and Ken was the cornerstone of my education and resolve. It's interesting, it was interesting to me to read the statements on the website. And it struck me that Larry Katz, crazy Larry, smart guy, but just not a scientist, didn't want to be a scientist, and he spent 4 years becoming one, and then he left. But we were really different. I stayed with science, and Larry became the senior researcher for CUPE. Like, he used research, he just didn't use hard science research. He used research from CUPE. And when I was talking to Larry, we both agreed that here we were so divergent, we had the one thing in common. Ken helped us form our careers and be successes. That's pretty remarkable when you think about the yin and the yang of it, right? I mean, how different could you be? And we were, and Larry and I remained friends in a way, although I said maybe we could do a better job of contacting each other once every 40 years, or isn't really too hard to beat. Now, to Ken's daughters, Jane and Anna, to his and Pat's daughter, Sarah, to Pat's sons, Sean and Scott, and to all the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, which really surprised me, and my special friend, Pat. Pat is special to me and will always be that way, just like Ken was. Please accept my and Kathy's condolences. These are celebrations of life, but you know what? They're still sad. No matter how you slice it, it's a sad day for all of us. And I will never forget Ken. He helped me with my career, and he helped me with my life, and that's pretty important stuff. Him and his pipe, Now, I'm not. There's a fair number of people who are going to speak, and I know Tom Mary's here. I don't know. There he is up there, and he wanted to say some words.